My son looked me in the eye across the Sunday dinner table and said, "Sell the house, Mom. My debt matters more than your memories." For a moment, the only sound in my kitchen was the old wall clock ticking above the pantry door, the same clock Robert had hung there 27 years ago after insisting every home needed one steady heartbeat. Daniel sat in his father's chair, though I had never invited him to. His wife, Vanessa, sat beside him in a cream sweater that looked too perfect for my little Rochester kitchen, her hand resting lightly on his wrist as if she had practiced the gesture in a mirror. I was 72 years old, a widow of 4 years, and I had spent the entire afternoon making pot roast because Daniel had told me he wanted a real family dinner. I had peeled carrots, polished the silver, set out Robert's blue-rimmed plates, and warmed the rolls in the oven the way my son liked them when he was a boy. I thought maybe he missed me. I thought maybe grief had finally softened the distance between us. Then Daniel pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket pocket and placed it beside my water glass. "It's $186,000, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Business debt. I have 30 days before things get ugly." Vanessa leaned forward, her smile small and controlled. "We've looked at the market, Margaret. Your house could sell fast. Older homes in this neighborhood are getting strong offers. Your house, not your home. Not the place where Daniel took his first steps, where Robert measured his height on the laundry room doorframe every September, where I stayed up through snowstorms waiting for my husband's truck to turn into the driveway. Just a house." I looked down at the paper without touching it. There were numbers, columns, a real estate estimate, even a suggested listing price. They had not come to ask. They had come prepared. And where would I go? I asked. Daniel cleared his throat. Vanessa answered for him. "There are lovely senior apartments outside Brighton. Smaller, safer, less upkeep." I folded my napkin slowly and set it beside my plate. My hands did not shake, though something deep inside me had gone very still. "And if I say no?" Daniel finally looked at me then, and the boy I had raised was nowhere in his face. "Then don't call yourself my mother." The words landed quietly. That made them worse. I waited for him to take them back. I waited for shame, hesitation, anything human. Vanessa only looked at the roast growing cold between us. I stood, picked up my plate, and carried it to the sink. "I heard you," I said. Daniel frowned, as if my calmness bothered him more than anger would have. But what my son did not know was that his father had prepared for this exact moment. After Daniel and Vanessa left that night, I did not clear the table right away. Their plates sat half full under the yellow kitchen light, the pot roast cooling in the center like a meal meant for a family that no longer existed. I stood beside the sink with my hands resting on the edge of the counter, listening to their car pull out of the driveway, then to the quiet that followed. It was not an empty quiet. It was the kind of quiet that remembers everything. The clock above the pantry kept ticking. The refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere upstairs, the floorboards settled in the hallway Robert had repaired one winter after Daniel dropped a toolbox and dented the wood. I could still see my husband there in his flannel shirt, kneeling with sandpaper in one hand, laughing because our little boy had tried to help and only made the damage worse. This house had never been large by wealthy standards. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a narrow front porch, a maple tree that dropped too many leaves every October. But to Robert and me, it had been the proof that ordinary people could build something permanent if they loved each other and worked hard enough. He drove freight across upstate New York for almost 30 years. I kept books for a family-owned furniture store on Monroe Avenue. We packed lunches, skipped vacations, fixed what broke instead of replacing it, and paid the mortgage 1 month at a time until the bank finally sent us the letter saying the house was ours. Robert opened that envelope at this same kitchen table. He read it twice, then kissed my forehead and said, "Maggie, no one can move you out now." I had believed him. 4 years before that terrible dinner with Daniel, when Robert knew his heart was growing weaker, he became careful in ways I did not understand at the time. He labeled file folders. He called our attorney, Mr. James Alden, more than once. He made me sit with him on the porch in late August while the cicadas buzzed in the maple tree and said, "Promise me you will not let anyone rush you into decisions after I am gone." I told him not to talk like that. He squeezed my hand and said, "Promise me." So I did. I promised. Back then, I thought he meant funeral arrangements, bank accounts, maybe selling his truck. I never imagined he meant our son. I walked through the house slowly that night, turning off lamps one by one. In the living room, Robert's old reading chair still faced the window. On the mantel, a photograph showed Daniel at 8 years old, missing one front tooth, holding a Little League trophy as if it were made of gold. I touched the frame and wondered when that boy had learned to look at me and see a price tag. Vanessa had not built those walls. She had not painted the nursery pale green before Daniel was born. She had not sat on the basement steps during a thunderstorm counting the seconds between lightning and thunder while a frightened child clung to her robe. Still, she spoke about my home like it was inventory waiting to be moved. I went upstairs to the bedroom I had shared with Robert for 34 years, opened the bottom drawer of his dresser, and found the sealed envelope he once told me to keep safe. My name was written across the front in his steady handwriting. I held it against my chest for a long moment before I opened it. Inside the envelope was not a dramatic warning or a legal document I could fully understand at first glance. It was a letter from Robert, dated 6 months before he passed, written in the same careful script he used on birthday cards and grocery lists. Maggie, it began, if you are reading this, someone has made you feel unsafe in the home we built together. I sat on the edge of our bed and read that sentence 3 times. The house around me seemed to hold its breath. Robert had seen something before I did. Maybe not the whole shape of it, but enough. His letter did not accuse Daniel. That was not Robert's way. He wrote that love could blind a mother longer than it should, and that guilt was the easiest leash for an adult child to place around an aging parent's neck. He reminded me that the deed, the insurance paperwork, and the updated estate documents were all filed through Mr. Alden. Then he wrote one line that made my eyes close for a moment. Do not confuse their emergency with your obligation. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back on my lap. The truth was, Vanessa had been circling the house for years. Only I had mistaken her footsteps for concern. After Robert's funeral, she started visiting more often, always carrying flowers or a casserole from some expensive grocery store, always looking around as if she were measuring the rooms with her eyes. At first, I was grateful. A quiet house after a funeral can make even the walls feel too far away, and I wanted to believe my daughter-in-law cared. She would stand in the kitchen doorway and say things like, "Margaret, this place must be so much work for you," or "Daniel worries about you climbing those stairs." The words sounded gentle. The pauses after them did not. Then came the brochures. A retirement community near Brighton. A senior apartment complex with elevators and weekly card games. A tidy little condo community where, as Vanessa put it, people your age can finally relax. She would slide those glossy papers across my coffee table beside Robert's obituary cards, as if one belonged naturally next to the other. Daniel rarely spoke during those visits. He sat on the sofa, turning his wedding ring with his thumb, letting Vanessa speak for both of them. That silence became its own kind of answer. The first time she asked about property taxes, I told myself she was being practical. The first time she asked whether Robert had left the house fully in my name, I told myself she was trying to help me organize things. The first time I caught her taking pictures of the dining room built-ins and the fireplace, she laughed and said, "Oh, I just love old woodwork." I believed that too, because belief was easier than suspicion. But after Daniel's demand, every memory rearranged itself. Vanessa standing too long in the hallway near Robert's office. Vanessa asking where we kept old bank statements. Vanessa suggesting that antiques were only valuable if someone knows how to sell them. I remembered her opening the china cabinet one Thanksgiving and saying, "This set could bring in real money if you ever downsized." At the time, I had smiled politely. Now I understood that she had not been admiring my life. She had been appraising it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, made coffee in Robert's chipped blue mug, and placed his letter beside me on the kitchen table. For the first time since the funeral, I did not feel alone in that chair. I felt watched over, and I knew exactly who I needed to call. The person I called was Helen Carter, the only friend who had known me before I became Mrs. Whitaker, before Daniel, before the mortgage, before the years turned my hair silver and my patience into a habit. Helen had worked at Genesee Trust for nearly 30 years before retiring, and she had the kind of mind that could look at a bank statement the way other people looked at a family photograph. She could see what was missing. She could tell when something had been arranged to look harmless. When I asked if she could stop by, she did not ask for details over the phone. She only said, "Put on coffee, Maggie." I will be there in 20 minutes. By 7:30 that morning, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table in a navy cardigan, reading Robert's letter with her glasses low on her nose. She did not interrupt. She did not gasp. Helen had buried a husband too, and women like us had learned that not every wound needed noise. When she finished, she folded the letter exactly along the same creases and slid it back to me. Robert was a careful man, she said. Careful men do not write letters like this unless they have already seen smoke. I told her everything, from Daniel's demand to Vanessa's brochures to the paper with the $186,000 figure. Helen reached for that paper last. She looked at the numbers for a long time, then turned it sideways, as if the truth might appear more clearly from another angle. This is not just personal debt, she said quietly. What do you mean? She tapped one line with her finger. This looks like a business obligation. See this notation? VW Holdings. That is not Daniel's initials. My kitchen felt colder, though the furnace had clicked on minutes before. Vanessa Whitaker, I said. Helen nodded once. Maybe, maybe not. But before you even think about selling a spoon from this house, you need to know who actually dug the hole they are asking you to fill. She took out her phone, not to snoop, but to search public business records, the kind anyone could see if they knew where to look. Within minutes, she found it. Vanessa Whitaker LLC, registered 16 months earlier. Business address listed as Daniel and Vanessa's townhouse in Pittsford. Purpose vague. Real estate consulting. Short-term rental management. Investment services. Helen read each phrase aloud, and every word landed like another chair being pulled away from the family table. I remembered Vanessa talking about passive income at Christmas, using a bright voice while Daniel stared into his coffee. I remembered her mentioning a vacation rental near the Finger Lakes, then changing the subject when I asked whether they had bought it. I remembered Daniel calling less often after that, his voice always tight, always rushed, always carrying something he refused to name. Helen kept searching. There were county records, a property transfer, a lien notice, a failed rental permit. Nothing secret exactly, just buried under ordinary paperwork, hidden from a 72-year-old mother who was supposed to trust her son without question. Maggie, Helen said, softer now. This debt may have Daniel's name on part of it, but Vanessa is standing in the center of it. I looked toward the living room, where Robert's photograph sat on the mantel, his smile steady and kind. I wanted to feel shocked. Instead, I felt the first clean edge of clarity. Daniel had not come to me because he had no other choice. He had come because I was the easiest choice. A mother with a house, a widow with memories, a woman they thought would rather lose her home than lose her son. Helen reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Now you call Mr. Alden, she said, and you do not warn Daniel first. I called Mr. James Alden at 9:15 that morning, using the number Robert had written on the back of his business card and tucked inside the same envelope as the letter. For a moment, I expected a receptionist to tell me he had retired, or moved, or forgotten us completely. Instead, his voice came through the line after 2 rings, older than I remembered but still precise. Margaret, he said, as if he had been expecting this call for years. I did not have to explain much. I said Daniel's name, then the words sell the house, and Mr. Alden went quiet in a way that told me Robert had not only prepared paperwork. He had shared fears. Can you come to my office this afternoon? He asked. I looked at Helen across the table. She nodded. Yes, I said. I can. Mr. Alden's office was downtown, on the 4th floor of a brick building near the county courthouse, the kind of place with old elevators and polished brass numbers on the doors. Helen drove me there, because she said no woman should walk into a room full of hard truths alone. I wore my gray wool coat and carried Robert's letter in my purse, though by then I knew Mr. Alden already had a copy of something far more important. His office smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and lemon furniture polish. Framed degrees hung behind his desk. A photograph of his grandchildren sat near a green banker's lamp. He stood when I entered, not because he was dramatic, but because some men still understood respect. Mrs. Whitaker, he said softly, I am sorry it has come to this. Those words settled over me more heavily than I expected, not because they surprised me, but because they confirmed what I had been trying not to admit. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a moment Robert had seen coming from the far side of his own life. Mr. Alden opened a locked file drawer and removed a thick folder with my name typed on the tab. Inside were copies of the deed, the updated will, a small trust document, and a sealed statement Robert had signed 11 months before he passed. Mr. Alden put on his reading glasses and explained each piece slowly, as if he knew my heart was hearing faster than my mind could follow. The house was mine outright. Not partly mine. Not emotionally mine. Legally mine. Robert had made certain the deed transferred fully to me, protected from Daniel, Vanessa, future creditors, and anyone who tried to use family pressure as a crowbar. Then Mr. Alden turned to the trust. Robert had left a separate inheritance for Daniel, but it came with conditions. If Daniel attempted to force, threaten, manipulate, or financially pressure me into selling my primary residence, Mr. Alden had authority to suspend and eventually revoke Daniel's access to that inheritance. I stared at the page where Robert's signature sat in blue ink. My husband had always signed his name with a firm downward stroke on the final letter, as if even his handwriting knew how to stand its ground. He loved Daniel, Mr. Alden said, but he loved you without confusion. I looked down at my hands in my lap. They were wrinkled, spotted, the hands that had packed school lunches, balanced household bills, held Robert's hand in hospital rooms, and still somehow felt unprepared for betrayal. Did Robert think Daniel would do this? I asked. Mr. Alden removed his glasses. He hoped he would not, but he wanted you protected in case love made you hesitate. I did not cry. I only nodded once. Then Mr. Alden slid a final envelope toward me. There is also a personal letter for Daniel, he said. Robert asked me to release it only if your son crossed this line. I placed my palm on the envelope, but did not open it. Not yet. For the first time since Daniel had sat in his father's chair and demanded my home, I felt something stronger than pain. I felt prepared. By the time Helen drove me home from Mr. Alden's office, the afternoon sun had slipped behind a sheet of pale gray clouds, and my house looked exactly the way it always had from the curb. White siding that needed washing near the gutters. Black shutters Robert had painted himself. Every few summers. The maple tree standing bare over the front walk. Nothing about it announced that a line had been drawn inside me. I carried the folder against my chest as Helen walked me to the porch. She looked at the front door, then at me. Do not let them rush you, she said. Rushing is how people make you sign away things they could never earn. I promised her I would not. That evening, I placed Robert's documents in the bottom drawer of the old secretary desk in the living room, the one with the brass handles Daniel used to pull when he was little, even though I told him not to. Then I made myself soup, watched the local news without hearing a word, and went to bed before 9. At 8:12 the next morning, Daniel called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Mom, he said, too brightly. Vanessa and I talked, and we think it would be smart to get ahead of this. A realtor can stop by tomorrow morning. Just a walkthrough. No pressure. No pressure. I looked across the kitchen at Robert's mug drying beside the sink. You already scheduled someone? There was a pause, small but telling. Only because time matters. In the background, I heard Vanessa whisper something. Daniel covered the phone, but not well enough. Tell her it is just information, she said. He came back with a softer voice. It is just information. I stirred my coffee even though I had not added sugar. Fine, I said. Bring whoever you want. The silence on the other end changed shape. He had expected tears, questions, pleading. Agreement confused him. Really? Tomorrow morning, I said. 10 o'clock. After I hung up, I stood very still for a while. Then I began cleaning. Not because I wanted to impress a realtor, and not because I had surrendered. I cleaned because every room deserved to be witnessed properly before they tried to reduce it to square footage. I dusted the mantel. I wiped the kitchen counters. I folded the quilt at the foot of the guest bed where Daniel used to sleep when he came home from college with laundry and empty pockets. The next morning, Daniel and Vanessa arrived at 9:58 with a woman named Claire Morris, a realtor in a camel coat and pointed shoes that clicked on my porch like a metronome. Vanessa stepped inside first, carrying a glossy folder under one arm and wearing the pleased expression of someone entering a room she believed she had already won. Margaret, you look well, she said. This is such a healthy decision. Daniel kissed my cheek without warmth. Claire smiled professionally and said, Your home has wonderful character. I thanked her and offered coffee. Vanessa declined for everyone. We should really start with the main floor. I poured myself a cup anyway. They moved from room to room, speaking in low voices that were not low enough. Original hardwood. Strong neighborhood. Needs updates. Great potential. Vanessa pointed toward the dining room built-ins and said, those could stay if it helps the sale. I looked at the shelves Robert had built during one snowy February and said nothing. Then Vanessa opened her folder at my kitchen table and spread out brochures for senior apartments, moving companies, and an estate sale service. This could all be very smooth, she said. You will thank us later. I sat across from her with my coffee between my hands and let her keep talking. Every sentence was a ribbon she was tying around her own intention. Daniel stood by the window, watching the realtor measure my living room with her eyes. For the first time, I did not try to rescue him from his own silence. After the realtor left, Vanessa gathered her brochures with the satisfied little smile of a woman who believed paperwork could soften a person into surrender. Claire Morris had been polite, almost too polite, and I could see discomfort in her face when Vanessa spoke over me in my own kitchen. Daniel walked her to the door, thanking her as if the appointment had been his to arrange. When he came back, he rubbed his hands together and said, "See, Mom? That was not so bad." I looked at him for a long moment. He was standing beneath the same doorway where Robert had once marked his height in pencil, year after year, until Daniel was tall enough to complain that we were embarrassing him. "Come to dinner Friday," I said. Vanessa blinked. Daniel frowned slightly. "Dinner? Yes. Friday at 6. I want to talk properly." Vanessa's expression brightened before she could hide it. "That sounds wonderful, Margaret. We can go over the next steps." I smiled just enough to let her believe what she wanted. "Yes," I said. "The next steps." For the rest of the week, I moved through my house with a strange calm. I did laundry. I paid the electric bill. I took Robert's winter coat from the hall closet and finally folded it into a storage box, not because I was ready to let him go, but because I no longer needed to keep grief hanging where everyone could see it. On Friday morning, Helen came by with a folder of printed public records and sat with me at the kitchen table while I made a list. Not a grocery list. A truth list. Vanessa Whitaker, LLC. Failed rental permit. Debt notice. Property lien. Realtor appointment scheduled without my consent. Senior apartment brochures. Each item looked small alone. Together, they formed a map of disrespect. At 4 o'clock, I put a pot roast in the oven, the same meal I had made the night Daniel first demanded the house. I peeled potatoes, sliced carrots, and set the table with Robert's blue-rimmed plates. This time, I did not set Daniel in his father's chair. I placed him on the side, across from Vanessa, and left Robert's chair empty. Not as a shrine, as a boundary. Daniel and Vanessa arrived at 5:55. Vanessa carried a bottle of wine I had not asked for and wore pearl earrings that caught the dining room light every time she turned her head. "Something smells amazing," Daniel said, trying to sound casual. "Your father loved this meal," I answered. His face flickered, but Vanessa stepped in smoothly. "It is sweet that you still keep traditions." Still, as if tradition were a harmless little hobby for old women. We ate for nearly 20 minutes with only polite conversation. Weather, traffic, a neighborhood road repair. Daniel kept glancing at Vanessa, waiting for her signal. I knew that look. He had worn it as a boy before asking permission for something he knew he should not want. Finally, Vanessa set down her fork. "Margaret, have you thought about the timeline?" I dabbed my mouth with my napkin. "For what?" "Her." Smile tightened. "For listing the house." Daniel leaned forward. "Mom, we do not have forever. The 30 days are already moving." I looked from him to his wife, then toward the empty chair at the head of the table. "Did you ever ask what your father wanted for me?" Daniel's eyes dropped to his plate. Vanessa gave a soft laugh. "Robert would want everyone taken care of." I turned back to her. "No, Vanessa. Robert wanted me taken care of." The room went quiet. Daniel swallowed. "Mom, please do not make this emotional." I reached beside my chair and lifted the folder from the seat next to me. "I am not making it emotional," I said. "I am making it accurate." I opened the folder slowly, not because I wanted to be dramatic, but because my hands had learned patience from years of folding hospital blankets, tax forms, school uniforms, and grief into shapes other people could live with. Daniel stared at the papers as if they were something alive. Vanessa's eyes moved faster. She recognized danger before he did. "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth but thinner now. "I really do not think dinner is the place for legal paperwork." "You brought a realtor into my home," I said. "You brought senior apartment brochures to my kitchen table. You brought a suggested listing price before you brought me the truth. So yes, Vanessa, this is exactly the place. Daniel shifted in his chair. Mom, what is this? I placed the first document on the table. The deed. Your father made sure the house belongs to me. Fully. Clearly. Without anyone else having a claim. Vanessa gave a small shrug, but her fingers tightened around her wine glass. No one said it was not yours. We are only asking you to do what is best for the family. I placed the second document beside the first. This is the trust your father created. Your inheritance is conditional, Daniel. If you pressure me to sell this house, if you manipulate me financially, if you try to use guilt to take away my security, Mr. Alden can suspend your access to what your father left you. Daniel's face changed then. The confidence drained from it first, then the color. That cannot be right. Vanessa leaned over the page. This is old. Paperwork. No, said a voice from the hallway. Both of them turned so quickly their chairs scraped against the floor. Mr. Alden stepped into the dining room, dressed in a dark overcoat, his leather briefcase in one hand. Helen stood just behind him, quiet and steady, holding her purse with both hands. I had asked them to arrive at 6:30. I had wanted Daniel and Vanessa to speak freely first. Mr. Alden removed his glasses from his coat pocket and looked directly at my son. It is current, valid, and very carefully written. Daniel stood halfway, then sat again. Mr. Alden, this is family business. The old attorney nodded once. That is exactly why Robert made it legal business. Vanessa's mouth tightened. This is unnecessary. Daniel came to his mother because he needed help. Helen walked to the sideboard and placed another folder down without a word. Mr. Alden opened it. Your debt appears to be tied, in significant part, to Vanessa Whitaker LLC, a failed rental investment, and a property lien in Ontario County. Daniel turned toward his wife. Not fully, just enough. But I saw the first crack in his certainty. Vanessa? She lifted her chin. It was for us. For our future. Then why? I asked quietly. Did my future become the payment plan? No one answered. Mr. Alden then handed Daniel the sealed envelope from Robert. Your father left this for you if this day ever came. Daniel looked at his name written in Robert's handwriting, and for a moment he was not a desperate man with a debt. He was a boy seeing his father's hand from beyond the grave. He opened it with clumsy fingers. As he read, his shoulders lowered inch by inch. Vanessa tried to look over the page, but he turned slightly away from her. I knew the words inside because Mr. Alden had shown me a copy that afternoon. Robert had written that a man who asks his mother to lose her home to protect his pride has already lost more than money. He wrote that love is not measured by what an elderly woman can sacrifice after everyone else has spent too carelessly. Daniel finished reading and did not speak. The room was so quiet I could hear the oven cooling in the kitchen. I looked at my son, then at Vanessa, and understood that my answer had already begun before I said a single word. I looked at Daniel sitting there with his father's letter trembling slightly in his hands, and I saw two people at once. I saw the grown man who had brought a realtor into my home without my consent, and I saw the little boy who used to run through the sprinkler in the backyard wearing red sneakers Robert had patched with duct tape because Daniel refused to throw them away. Loving a child does not stop when they disappoint you. That is the cruel part. The love remains, but the trust does not. Daniel lowered the letter onto the table. His eyes were wet, though he would not let a tear fall in front of Vanessa. Mom, he said, his voice smaller than I had heard it in years. I did not know Dad wrote that. Neither did I said. Vanessa pushed back from the table. This is ridiculous. Everyone is acting as if we tried to steal something. We asked for help. Families help each other. Helen's face hardened, but she stayed silent. Mr. Alden closed his briefcase with a soft click. I kept my eyes on my daughter-in-law. Help is when someone asks with respect. What you did was bring me brochures for a life I never chose, paperwork for a sale I never agreed to, and guilt dressed up as concern. Vanessa looked at Daniel. Are you going to let her talk to me like that? For the first time that evening, Daniel did not answer her. That silence was different from all the others. It was not cowardice. It was the beginning of recognition. I turned back to my son. Daniel, I will not sell this house. I will not drain my savings. I will not use the roof your father left over my head to cover a debt you and your wife created while pretending it belonged to the whole family. He swallowed. I can fix it. I just need time. Then take time, I said. Call the bank. Call a financial advisor. Sell a car. Sell a vacation property. Downsize your own life before you ask your mother to give up hers. Vanessa stood. Come on, Daniel. We are leaving. He did not move right away. That bothered her more than anything I had said. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair and walked toward the door, her heels sharp against the hardwood Robert had refinished with his own hands. At the hallway, she turned. You will regret choosing a house over your son. I stood then, slowly, with one hand resting on the table. No, Vanessa. I regret teaching my son that my love had no limits. Tonight, I am correcting that mistake. The front door closed behind her with enough force to rattle the glass pane, but not enough to shake me. Daniel remained seated, staring at the letter. Mr. Alden explained the conditions clearly. Within 48 hours, Daniel had to withdraw any attempt to list, pressure, or financially involve my home. He also had to provide written acknowledgement that he had no claim to the property and would not contact real estate agents on my behalf again. If he refused, the trust would be suspended immediately. Daniel nodded without looking up. When he finally stood, he seemed older than when he arrived. At the door, he turned back. Mom, I am sorry. I wanted those words to heal everything. They did not. But they were a beginning, and I was old enough to know beginnings should not be mistaken for endings. Be sorry with your actions, I said. Not your voice. He left quietly. Helen hugged me before she and Mr. Alden went home, and then the house was mine again. Not legally. It had already been legally mine. It was mine in the deeper way, the way a woman feels when she stops apologizing for surviving. I cleared the plates, wrapped the leftovers, and sat for a while in Robert's chair by the window. The maple tree outside moved gently in the cold Rochester wind. For the first time in 4 years, the silence did not feel empty. It felt protected.